We are live. We are live on the Jeff Nosine podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Sean Wachter. This guest there's so many similarities. I mean, obviously our journeys through cancer, but our love of combat sports and stuff like that. But I found you on social media. I guess we just started connecting, and
Yep.
instantly I was just like linked to your page and seeing your journey. And even today I saw your post today that, I mean, this podcast will be released in a couple of weeks, but saw your post today with your dog, and I'm a big dog guy for Valentine's. Like all these little things, I find this connection to you, Sean. So I'm so excited to hear your journey. Like, you went from college football to pro football. Like, there's so much layers of what you've done. And when I see something like you, um I look at more people like have to be shown your journey, your story. Like, you should be, your story should be in front of a lot more people, because you hear all these social media influencers and these millions of followers. I'm like, they have no journey, they have no story, they haven't lived life, they haven't experienced life, they haven't had the ups and downs like somebody like you that has. And so many people can learn from your journey. So I'm excited to be able to, with my audience, and we got a pretty big audience, allow our journey, especially the Canadians, to hear your journey. So let's start off, man. Like, where'd you grow up, and give me the breakdown of you as a kid growing up and stuff, and how did you get into football?
Well, Jeff, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure, and like you said, there's so many similarities. I feel like almost like we are like an alternate universes versions of ourselves. So, I guess to talk about my upbringing, I had a stay-at-home mom, which was awesome. You know, my dad busted his rear end to make sure she was able to stay at home and help, raise me. My father is probably my best friend, and until this day, he should have probably beat the tar out of me a lot more growing up, but I guess he had a soft spot, which was hard to find because he is a Vietnam vet, a retired narcotics detective from a local police department here on Long Island down in the States, where I grew up and have lived my entire life, basically. So having him with that type of background and kind of rigidness, along with two grandfathers that were in World War II,
Wow.
and both were blue collar guys. One was a bartender and one was a carpenter. So I had a lot of great men around me growing up. But my father is a New York Jet fan, which is unfortunate. Which is very unfortunate. Yes, yes. No, that's yeah, because I unfortunately am a Jet fan as a result of him, and my two daughters are now unfortunately Jet fans because of me. So I have passed the suffering down via generations. So that was how I first started to get into football. But honestly, I was not a sports kid growing up. I shockingly enough, and this is the first time I've actually got into this with some folks, is when I was growing up until I got into high school, I was in all the musicals, I was in all the plays, I was a child.
Seriously.
Yeah, I was a child model. I don't know how this happened. Ugh. Father Time has not been kind. But no, I did all that stuff. I was in the choir. I just really was drawn to performing and theatrics, and I guess it's kind of what.
It's a full circle with the wrestling.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what drew me to the wrestling. But back
Yeah.
to the football question, I was a big kid. I was a really big kid. I was probably about 6 feet tall, 210 pounds when I was in seventh grade. So
Wow.
yeah, I could not make the weight limit for the Pee Wee football team down here in the States. So football was not an option to me until I got to high school. And my folks actually thought that I really didn't want anything to do with athletics. They were shocked when I said, "Hey, I want to go to the West Point football camp to learn how to play football. So when I go to my high school tryout, I don't embarrass myself." And I went, I learned, and I found something that frankly I was really good at. And it wasn't by any sort of natural ability that I was good at it. It was through that work ethic that was drilled into my head from my father and my grandfathers. I was the guy that would want to run sprints with the wide receivers and the quarterbacks when I was a lineman, just to
Yeah.
push myself a little bit harder and push my teammates. And, I came from a decently sized private high school down here on Long Island, but my particular grade year, it was only me and my friend that went to the weight room. The guys just kind of didn't buy into that, but
Yeah.
we fell in love with it, and he's still my one of my best friends until this day. But we wrestled together, we played football together, and then I went on to play lacrosse. But I kept up with the weightlifting. I fell in love with that. I became a meathead overnight. And when it came time for my senior year, I was very fortunate. I had a living room table filled with recruiting letters and offers for both football and lacrosse, and a few for wrestling as well. And I thought that that's what I was going to do. Unfortunately for me, I didn't realize you actually have to continue the academic process in order for those offers to be fully completed. So I found out at the age of 18 while I was working out at a local gym. A gentleman came up to me and said to me, "Hey, I saw you have a Hulk Hogan shirt on there." And I had the old ripped up Hulkamania, red and yellow shirt on,
Yeah.
thinking I was the size of Andre the Giant as an 18-year-old, walking around all puffed up. And he said, "Do you want to give wrestling a try?" And I said, "Well, I wrestle in high school." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. Like, my buddy runs a wrestling school." And back when I was 18 in 2022, there was no Google quite yet. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the was very protected as far as where to go, where to learn, where to train, and there was not an overabundance of wrestling schools or dojos. So I went and I found my local wrestling school through this gentleman, and I was 3 months into training. And I remember this like it was yesterday. It was a cold Sunday morning, probably about end of January, beginning of February, almost kind of like around this period of
Yeah.
time. And I pulled up to the wrestling school and I got out of my car, and like a movie, I heard another car door slam behind me. And for some reason, I said, "Oh no, this is not good." And I turned around and there was my father in his pajamas. And he was like, "What in the hell are you doing here?" And I was scared to death. And I said, "Oh," and he heard, because the building that the wrestling school in was like a little old tin shack.
Yeah.
So he heard the ring creaking and he heard the guys going, "Oh," and the body slamming. And he said, "Oh no, oh no." And I'm surprised he didn't shoot me right on the spot. But he said, "You are not doing this. You have college and you have football. You are not doing this." And of course, thinking what I thought, I said, "Well, I'm 18. I could do whatever I want." And he said, "Well, that's great. I'm 50, whatever he was at the years old at the time. That's my house you live in. So you're 18, you can move out. But if you're going to continue wrestling, you're out." So I unfortunately had to choose something that probably was the better thing for me at the time. And I went ahead with, going ahead and playing college football. Unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, a bunch of those really nice offers and scholarships that were extended to me, they were quickly revoked as my mid-year grades
Came
came
back.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I coached football for about 9 years here on Long Island, and I always tell my kids this story. I remember laying in my bedroom thinking I was king of the world, and my father came in with a waste paper basket, and he said, "Oh, did you happen to see your grades yet for the second half of the year?" And I said, "No, sir." And he goes, "Well, let me tell you how they were." And he had all the letters in his hand, and he dumped them right in the trash. And he said, "You're going to community college next year." So that's where I started out, and I got to red shirt for football and red shirt at lacrosse for my local community college. Wasn't really sure at first if college was going to be it for me, but a lot of the schools started to pique their interest back up in me, I guess, because they saw, that he's willing to put the time in to commit to his academics. So I wound up going to a small school in upstate New York, Alfred State College, and I played football and I played lacrosse there, which was an awesome experience. And when I was done playing football there, I was fortunate enough to get a look from the Arena Football League. And I played for the New York Dragons during preseason. And then I spent the 2008 regular season with the New Jersey Revolution, which was a really fun experience. And at the end of the season, there was actually some interest from the Canadian Football League. I
Okay.
was I was invited to a free agent camp with the Toronto Argonauts. They wanted me to do their long snapping, and again, just life happened, and I tore my pec and totally destroyed my shoulder working out, getting ready for this tryout camp, and doctors down here in the States. And, I had someone that actually was the Jets team physician. He told me, hey kid, your football career, or at least getting paid for it, is done. So I didn't really know what to do. Luckily, I found coaching and teaching, and I actually started to teach at one of the local high schools. I ran their in-school suspension program, and I also coached football, and I was the district strength and conditioning coach for 4 years, which I absolutely, absolutely loved. It was such a rewarding experience. But 2008 was the big ripple effect, and with the world economics, and basically, a few years later, I was let go from my position just because there wasn't room enough to pay me in the budget.
How old were you by then?
Oh gosh, I must have been about 26,
26.
yeah, 26 years old. And at that point, I had a side business. I basically ran a nightclub security and executive protection business, which was great, good money. Got to work with some pretty neat celebrities, uh, but I still didn't know what I really wanted to do. I had tried to uh, go through the process with the New York City Police Department, and I was waiting to be called by them. Um, and I said, while I'm waiting, let me see if I could go try wrestling again. And I started to wrestle again. And again, it was only like another 3 or 4 month spat, because during that time I had a cousin in one of the local unions get me in. And unfortunately, again, life happened. Pretty nasty accident, and broke my neck and back, and lost my ability to walk. So
What do you mind me asking what happened accident wise?
I really can't get much into it. There's some papers that have been signed, so
Okay.
I would say there was an accident.
Yeah.
That's all I'm allowed to say. It was outside of wrestling, but it left me in a bad way. It left me in a pretty bad way, and my father, again, one of my best friends, if not my best friend, basically had to help nurse me back to health. And it took me a good year of living with him, and him having to help me shower and clean myself, where I was able to finally start using a walker and fully transition out of a wheelchair. And eventually from there, I moved on to just using a cane to ambulate. And about another year after that, I was finally back on my feet. I was living on my own, just trying to find my way through life. All my buddies at that point were married and having kids.
Yeah.
I think I gave like 5 best man speeches in like a period of like 3 years, and out of nowhere, I just started not feeling well. And this was about 2016, spring of 2016. Wasn't feeling well at all, and I spent, gosh, from March of 2016 to September of 2016, I spent all those months going to doctors of different, disciplines, different specialties, different medical facilities, and saying, hey, look, something is not right with me. I have these wild headaches, which they automatically said, oh, well, you played football for X number of years, or you did this, you had your accidents. That's where your headache comes from. And I tried to explain, like, no, this is different. And I was having wild bouts of nausea, a whole bunch of mental, confusion. My cognition was shot. And again, oh, these are all side effects from concussions. I said, no, something's going on. And there were 3 separate instances where, as a young man and as a bachelor, I tried to date, and I went on 3 different first dates. And the reason why there weren't second or third or an eventual relationship was all three of those dates, I wound up blacking out and collapsing and having to go to the hospital, which really, as a single guy, is not something that's too endearing. So I wound up finally, after months of telling people I was not feeling well. Like I said, we're now in September of 2016. It was a weekend, and I started off my weekend with going to the local medical facility. And that was a Friday evening. And they basically told me, we're going to commit you and put you on a psychological hold as we think you have something mentally wrong with you. And I fought them tooth and nail on that. And I said, you guys are missing the boat. And I wound up leaving the hospital against doctor's orders. And I went to my parents' house. I didn't even bother driving back to my apartment. Drove to my parents' house, woke them up, and said, something is not right, and no one is listening to me. And my dad was a little skeptical himself, but he still said, I know you know when you're not feeling well. So he's like, just stay here the weekend. We'll figure out something on Monday. Well, Monday came, and I was probably awake for about 20 minutes. My folks said, look, we're going out to do some errands. And unfortunately, the errand they were running was cleaning out my aunt's house, who just had passed away from adenocarcinoma. So my dad just said, hey, and he jokingly said it, and I'm sure he regrets it to this day. He said, do me a favor. I know you're not feeling well, but only call me if you're dying. So 10 minutes after he left the house, I was on his living room floor, full on bout of Bell's palsy, couldn't use my legs, throwing up on myself. And luckily, I had my cell phone in my pocket, and I just started mashing my cell phone, and it connected to my dad. And my dad, through his years of training with the police department and the military, knew that something was seriously not wrong. So he drove like a bat out of hell back to his house and found me laying on the floor. And he helped pick me up, and he just knew that if he waited for an ambulance, I may not be sitting here speaking with you. So he brought me back to the same medical facility I went to on Friday night, where I was greeted with, oh, great, it's him again, as I proceed to throw up all over myself as they try to force insurance paperwork into my hands. They then bring me back and put me into the non-emergency area as my face is drooping, as I'm throwing up, and they're telling me, you probably have a head cold. And I had to use some crass language and tell them, you better give me a scan because something is wrong. And they finally listened, and they stuck me into a CAT scan machine. And about maybe 6 seconds in, all you heard was stroke team, room such and such. And I remember just being wheeled back to the room that I was in. And now my folks were there, and they had to see their only son having a stroke right in front of them. And they told him, they said, there's a golf ball sized tumor in his cerebellum that's causing a massive hemorrhage. He's had a very large stroke. We don't know if we're going to be able to stop the bleeding. So, I was there for about a week, whole bunch of transfusions, and then eventually I had a craniotomy, and they went in and they took that tumor out. And I was very fortunate that the doctor and surgeon who were performing the operation were actually from another hospital, a very reputable local hospital. And they had a handler from this medical facility who did not want either of them talking to my parents because they wanted their people to be the one to tell my parents what was going on. And the surgeon who had been practicing for 35 years, came out and went to go speak with my parents. And the way my dad tells the story is he basically pie-faced his handler and told him to shut the blank up, and that my family had a right to know. And he said, I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your son has cancer. That's a melanoma tumor in his brain, and it's very sizable. It's very far advanced. Please get your son some good care after we get him cleaned up. And they were not happy. That medical facility was not happy that doctor shared that information. But the first memory of me having my cognition back after the surgery, which was probably 2 days after the fact, my dad was in the hospital room with me with my mom, and I remember him rubbing my ankle. And he said, "Sean, you have cancer." And I just realized in that moment, my mom, my dad, they needed their son to be strong for them and for me. So I just very stoically looked back at my father and I said, "Yes, sir, we got this. We're going to fight." And my mother just started laughing, and I couldn't understand why she'd be laughing at this moment. And she just said, "I am so amazed by you because that was the most mature thing I think I've ever heard come out of your mouth in 31 years. I am so proud of you. You have no idea. And I know you're going to fight because we raised you to do that." So 3 days later, when the medical facility sent their staff in to tell me, and they said, "Oh, we're sorry, you have cancer," I said, "Yeah, I already know. Thanks. Can you guys leave my room now?" Which they all looked dumbfounded because they couldn't be like, who told them? So I was there for maybe another few weeks. And just as I was about to get discharged, that medical facility was fighting for me to get my oncological care there. And there was no chance in hell that I was going to let them do any further treatment or diagnosis of me. And I remember the nurse who was in charge of the ICU floor asked if my parents could just step back into the room. She closed the door behind them and she said, "Look, we're an okay hospital and we're okay at a lot of things. You need to go someplace that's great at cancer care. And honestly, if you don't get your kid to Memorial Sloan Kettering, I don't know what's going to happen to him." And my father, right then and there, began the process. Very fortunate that I got taken in by the folks at Sloan. And from there, I was told I needed to have a couple of rounds of radiation to clean up the surgical bed. And at that point, that was one of what I consider the benchmark moments of my mindset going into this battle, because at the time they did not have a separate pediatric radiation oncology unit. So I got to sit there with folks at the time who I considered were probably about my age, 31. Then I had a kid or two, but they had a kid there. And to see that poor child, 2 or 3 years old, just suffering, and I know you're a father and we've spoken about it. I have two young girls. So I can only imagine the weight that would have carried even more back then. But in that moment, I just saw those kids and I just said, "You know what? Don't you dare feel sorry for yourself," because at that point I had made every mistake a 31-year-old guy can make. I lived a lot. My friends have always joked around and told me that I'm the effed up Forrest Gump. So I got to do some cool stuff, and I figured, you know what, the sorries and the prayers and the well wishes better suited for those kids because they haven't even had a chance to steal a damn cookie yet. So that was like moment number one. And from there, I wound up going home and I just was trying to figure out, like, how are you going to do this? How are we going to get through this? Like what's going to get us through this whole thing? And if this is something that maybe we can't win, we're not going to go out on our knees. We're going to go out swinging and fighting. And I just remembered, there's a quote that I always go to, and it's from Stuart Scott, who was the ESPN sportscaster who passed away back in about 2014, 2015. But he accepted the Jim Valvano Courage Award at the ESPYs, which is ESPN's, Oscar award.
I remember this.
Yep. And he got up there and he said, when you die, it doesn't mean you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and the manner in which you live. So live. And I just vowed that I was just going to do exactly that. I was going to keep on living my life to the best of my ability. And then, unfortunately, I started having massive, massive seizures. And I had to be brought into Sloan Kettering in Manhattan, which is about an hour drive from my parents' house on Long Island. And I remember my father had gotten me there and I had a little mini seizure. And they said, "Okay, we're going to probably keep him. We need to run a whole bunch of tests." And they asked me if I could walk just a few feet, and I had a massive, massive seizure where there was some brain activity issues that went on as well. And my poor father, he had to stand there and watch me flopping around on the floor like a fish in front of him while 12 doctors and nurses are all trying to get an IV on me and just try to do something to get me. I started to choke on my own tongue. They had to do a lot of work on me. And it turned out at that point that I had a rare complication that only happens in about 5% or less of melanomas, which is called leptomeningeal disease. And essentially, that's where the cancer has metastasized to your spinal cord fluid, and you start to die a very painful death where the cancer cells will cause the spinal cord fluid to coagulate and basically block it off from the rest of your brain. So you basically go brain dead through the course of your death. And I was given 12 weeks to live and told to get my affairs in order. So that was a real uh, part of my crest. That was a kick in the nuts. That was I already knew that I had the cancer. I already said I was going to fight it, but now you hit warp speed on it. It's like I was already stage 4. It had already gone to my lungs, my bowels, my kidney, my throat, my brain. You know, but I said, all right, well, I skipped stages 1, 2, and 3. Now we're on to 4. But that's what it is. And now they threw this little cherry on top of the sundae. And that really, like I said, that made me go like, oh shoot, how are we gonna do this? And then I was laying in bed that night, and there's a motivational speaker that I always suggest that everyone listen to. His name is Inky Johnson.
Yeah.
He
I listen to him. I watch him all the time too. Yeah.
Inky is great. And for your listeners that don't know Inky's story, Inky was basically going to be a top 10 draft pick in the NFL draft. And he was a starting cornerback for the University of Tennessee. I think that there was maybe like 4 or 5 games left in that particular season. And he basically said it himself, like 4 or 5 games, and I'm an automatic millionaire. Because back then they gave these wild contracts to rookies, and some of them didn't out go well, and some of them worked out. But I digress. So Inky is going and he's playing West Point, the military academy here in the United States, and he's making a routine tackle down the sidelines and winds up severing an artery and the nerve going to his arm. And he was told, as he's on his way to the hospital, well, your football career is over for sure. You're going to lose use of this arm, and you're possibly going to lose your life. So he was laying there in the hospital bed, and I guess he was feeling a little bit sorry for himself. And the title of the video is "It's Not About You." And he was talking about how he was the main support system in all aspects for his family. They grew up in the southern United States, poor socioeconomic background, not exact, but maybe, 9 brothers and sisters, mom, aunt, grandmother living in a 2-room house. So him getting to the NFL was that family's ticket to getting out of poverty. And he worked his butt off for it, but he lost all of it in just a split second, and he was thinking about throwing in that towel, and he said, if I would have just called it a day, my mother loses her son, his grandmother loses her grandson, his brothers and sisters lose his brothers, and his teammates lose their teammate, and so on. So it's not about you. I was fortunate enough to have about 30 college and high school football teammates make an Excel spreadsheet as to who was responsible for me at what time and where, who was watching football, who was bringing the food, who was taking me out. Everyone had it all broken down to give my parents a break. And no worries. And essentially I realized in that moment, I got my folks, I got my buddies, they need me.
Yeah.
They're not trying to think that from a pompous or selfish point, but you don't realize how much people care about you until moments like that. Because I didn't think anyone really gave a crap about me but it turned out a lot of people did. A lot, a lot.
And you realize quickly the fight is not about you, it's about everybody else around you as well.
Exactly. As a cancer patient, cancer survivor, we have a lot put on us. And we always think like, oh, we have the weight of the world on our shoulders. But think about the people that are closest to us. They have a weight on them too, because is our loved one going to pass away? Are they going to be here next year? Are they going to be all right today? Will they be the same? What's next? So just like we get exhausted, they get exhausted too. So just as much as they pick us up, we need to try to find the strength to pick them up as well, because we have a responsibility to them.
Yeah. And
So,
feeling sorry for yourself never it doesn't matter what avenue of life is never going to be a positive attitude about it. I'm going to jump in there. I just want to tell two quick things to you, and it's
of
just our
course,
similarities. In my lifetime, I've lost two friends. One at 33 years old to exact same thing you had, a brain tumor. 33, passed away. He was married, left his back then 6, 7 year old daughter behind. And when he got diagnosed, the minute he got diagnosed, he just gave up on life. And I watched him wither away so quickly to the point where within, I would say, he survived 6 months. Maybe after 3, 4 months, he should have been gone. He was just suffering at that point. He just gave up on life to the point where he moved out of his house with his wife and kids and moved in with his parents because he didn't want to be around his wife and kids to see him like that. And I saw him wither away, and then I had another gentleman, a really close friend of mine, who passed away with cancer, and both of them just gave up on life. And I remember always telling myself, if this ever were to happen to me, I would be the pure opposite. And I kept telling myself that, and it somewhat prepared me, because November 23rd, I found out 2022, I was diagnosed with cancer, and these are a whole bunch of things I want to talk about, but I was a huge proponent and I was an advocate of myself, and I pushed myself. My doctor thought I had hemorrhoids. He was like, Jeff, you don't have to do a colonoscopy. I had to push and push and push to get a colonoscopy done, which is incredible. And when I wake up to the gentleman the at the hospital telling me that he found a tumor in me, and it's such a small world, because when I went to do my colonoscopy, the I was about to be put under, and I hear Jeff Lopes. I looked up, and the gentleman that was performing it, the doctor, I actually known him for our sons played in the same baseball league. Like, I've known him for years. Small world. So this is the guy that woke me up to give me the news. So somebody that had a personal connection to me, which would made it even harder. And I remember coming home and sitting with my wife and my kids, and looking at my daughter and being like, I'm going to walk you down the aisle. This is not going to defeat me. And that was my first mindset. And I remember within less than 24 hours, I was like, okay, suck this up, stop being a bitch. Let's figure out how to fight this. And
oh,
within
yeah.
28 days, I had an oncologist booked. I had a surgeon booked. I had a surgery date booked. I had done a scope. I had done a CT scan. I had done an MRI, all within a 28-day period, because I went on an obsession where it's like, I am not going to be a part of this system. I'm going to fend for myself and do what I have to do to advocate for myself, because I want to be here for my kids and be here for my wife and for my mom. And I think a lot of people sit back and just whatever the doctor says. Yes, sir. 3 months, sir. No problem. Do chemo. Nope. They just sit back and follow the medical system, not understanding how being an advocate for yourself, you have to
Yeah.
fight for yourself. So anybody listening out there that going through a situation, like, you have to be an advocate for yourself. You have to push for yourself, because you are a perfect example where if a doctor gave a shit from day one, this could have been found months before.
Oh, yeah, no, and it probably because I had a CAT scan for my neck issues, and they got the brain in there, and they said, "Oh, crystal clean," and that was in May. Now you fast forward to September, I got something the size of a golf ball. So it's like if they would have said, "Oh, that spot on your lung," instead of just saying, "Oh, well, you had pneumonia so many times," if they actually would have looked at it, they would have been like, "Oh, you have cancer that has already metastasized." And you hit it right on the head, Jeff. And that's something that I've told people forever. Never surrender your ability to advocate for yourself. It's just with cancer, you know, it's like the cancer fighter, my ring name. it's not just that. It's literally how you need to view cancer. This is a nasty fight. This is a nasty, dirty fight. And quite frankly, you're going to go into the deepest, darkest, coldest alleyway you've ever been in your life with cancer.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, only one thing comes out. You are the cancer. So you got to be the baddest MFer in the room. And you got to handle it that way. You got to treat everything like it's preparing for a fight, just like you did going ahead and I got this booked. I did this. I did that. Boom, boom, boom. You need to do these things. You need to be active in your own treatment process. To sit back on your heels and let people spoon feed you things. I'm sorry, but
No,
unless miracle, you're not going to make it out of this.
no.
You got to be the baddest MFer in that room, and you got to come out of that alleyway with your chest puffed out.
Yeah. And be an advocate for learning about the disease. A lot of
Yes.
people just sit back and you can Google, but it's also there's a lot of fear mongering going on. There's a lot of things you're going to read on the internet where it's like mm, death is around the corner. And you have to be an advocate to understand that there is a lot of survivors like yourself, like myself, that are there advocating and helping people and giving people direction and motivation. And once you understand cancer as a metabolic disease and understand, I mean, there's three things that cause cancer. And I tell this all the time. It's either environment, consumption of food, stress. Those are the three things that we need to control on a regular basis. And living in North America, diet is a huge concern for people.
Yes.
And what people put in their bodies and stress and environment and work areas and there's so much things that we could do on a regular basis to be preventative. And I think we're going in the opposite direction. If you look at the mortality rate in the US and Canada is driply dropping, and then you go to countries like other parts like Europe, it's increasing. And it's just their lifestyle, the processed food, the crap they put in their body on a regular basis. So we have to be advocates and we have to be aware and we have to learn about all these things and read and understand and educate ourselves. I think it's a huge part, and also stay focused too. I mean, if you are in a situation when you're diagnosed, when I was diagnosed, from the November 23rd to February 16th, less than 10 people in my life knew what was happening with me. I just shut down in a way where I needed to stay focused, and having outside distraction was not going to allow me to stay focused. So I needed to stay focused to get to the surgery date. So, and because of that, I mean, when it came time for my surgery, my tumor had shrunk almost 60% my body. I went in for a 4.5 hour surgery, two surgeons, 9 people in the room, 5 incisions in me. They to remove 65% of my rectum, 23 lymph nodes. And I was going in thinking I was going to come out with a colonoscopy bag. I was going to have a shit bag the rest of my life. And that was my biggest fear. And
Yeah.
thinking, and I went in where the surgery went from 4.5 hours to 3 hours, didn't need a bag. And it's because everything I did from November 23rd to February 16th, how I took care of myself. It is, and it's proven if you do take care of yourself, your body could do wonderful, amazing things, right? So huge advocate on that, right? So there's something I want to jump into, then we're going to get into your story with your wrestling and all that stuff, but something you keep talking about, and just two things you keep talking about. One is when you sat there and saw children with this disease and how it hit you emotionally and it, if anything, give you more courage. My son, everybody knows my story. My son spent the first 4 months of his life at Sick Kids Hospital. We have one of the best pediatric hospitals in the world here. And after that, I mean, till this day, he's still followed up there. And I remember there was a time when we had to go to a department because part of his surgeries, he ended up with 2 blood clots. So we had to go to this department. And that department also treated children with cancer. And I would sit there for an hour, 2 hours in this room, in this waiting room, and watching these children around. And this is years back. And I would just sit there and just, it angers you. It upsets you. It just, you sit there and you're like, how is this possible? And it makes you very aware of how precious life is and how short life is. And cancer has no age, no sex, no shit. It's a vicious, nasty disease that it affects so many people. And when you look at any cancer, I mean, they're saying stat wise, 47% of males and I think 43% of females are going to get cancer over their lifetime. That's where we
Yep.
are at this point, which is crazy. That's 1 out of every 2, pretty much.
Yep.
Insane numbers.
It's alarming. It really is. And I think what helps increase that number, unfortunately, is, we have become a society, especially after COVID, of being in our houses. I get to benefit from remote work, which is wonderful because I get to spend time with my wife and my 2 daughters a little bit more than I would be able to if I worked in an office. But under the same token, I still make sure that I get out every day because I'm a professional athlete. I'm getting out there and training and I'm working out. But it's just, I think a lot of people have just gotten used to a very sedentary lifestyle and they become attached to the screens.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of it, but there has to be some sort of balance.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. There's one thing too. The second thing I wanted to talk about is your relationship with your dad. Oh, I swear to God, I have a smile ear to ear. My dad, this May, will be 3 years he passed away,
I'm sorry for that.
and everything you're saying, that was me and my dad. Like I was the 40 when he passed away. I was 44. 44. I was 44 when he passed away. I was the 44-year-old Sean that talked to my dad 3 times a day. I would call him on the way to work. I would call him on my way home, and we would talk every night before he go to bed. We had a great relationship. He had an incredible relationship with my kids, and I would see him usually once a week, minimal. And he was my best friend. And I think people take shit like that for granted. So I appreciate that you keep mentioning he's your best friend, and you appreciate that because, like anything, I mean, most people on their deathbed is all the regrets, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of people take things like your parents going to be around forever as something that is going to happen, and then when something does happen, it's that regret you're going to have because you're never going to be able to see them again. So I appreciate you understanding how important your parents are and how much they've been impacting your life and been there for you. Because I spend a shitload of time with my dad. I always saw him. We did a ton of things together. We did a lot of we do a lot of construction and building and stuff together. Like we're always together. And I still have regrets. I still wish I could. There's so many things more I wanted to do with them. So any listener out there, like if you have a great relationship with your parents, and if you don't, mend it, try to mend it because it's so important. But if you do have a great relationship with your parents, see them, spend as much time, make those phone calls, even if you live far away. Pick up the phone. Don't have the regrets because it's going to haunt you the rest of your life if you have any regrets like that. So I appreciate that, and it just put a smile on my face every time you talk about dad. Every time you said it over 4 or 5 times, my best friend, and it just puts a smile on my face because that was me and my dad. So I appreciate it. I just wanted to say that to you, brother.
Oh, thank you. And it's I am so fortunate to be living the life that I am living currently. And the neat stuff that I'm getting to do is not lost on me, but to bring it to what you're speaking about with the relationship with my dad, part of some of the neat stuff that I've been doing, and there'll be some local media down here in New York that I got to film with my dad, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But also, there's a larger project that I'm not allowed to speak about at this time that will be released possibly globally that I got to do with my dad last week. And it actually involved wrestling, which to me is hysterical because he stopped me the first time. And I know the second time he couldn't stop me, but he wasn't
Full
thrilled about it.
circle. Full circle.
And this third go around, he wasn't happy at the beginning, but now he's seen the inspiration that people are getting out of it. And he sees my interactions with folks on social media and he shifted so wildly. And I don't want to be like, ha, told you so, but it's awesome to get to see him actually be like, oh, I'm kind of proud of my kid for doing this after so many years and be like, oh, what a knucklehead.
That's awesome. So let's dive into that. Let's dive into your wrestling and how
Sure.
your I don't know if you call it a stage name and how it all progressed
Oh, well,
and
I got a little bit of backtracking that I just want to do, and I'll try to be
yeah,
brief.
yeah,
Because,
100%.
like I said, I hit that point where they told me get your affairs in order.
Yeah.
There was some clinical trials going on at the time because I had failed already a few different types of chemo. My body was not responding to it. My organs were failing. And through clinical research and clinical trials that I will always thump that Bible. I will always push people to please give what they can to organizations that truly give 100% of their funding to clinical research and trials, because I am the success story of those. And they were able to find a oral chemotherapy, 2 pills in combination, that I was able to start taking that actually stopped the progression of my cancer. And at that point, I was allowed to start traveling, and we kept getting more and more time. And then that March, so now we went from September 2016 now to March of 2017. They said, "You're doing so well. There is a phase 2 trial, and you are only allowed to participate in it because you have been deemed terminal, that we will use 3 medications on you." So I had actually gotten an additional infusion medication, which was immunotherapy, which was brand new at the time. And I remember the morning after I'd gotten my first infusion, yeah, I had some tummy problems and had to run to the bathroom a few times, but I had this gigantic fire engine red beard. And I don't know if you can see, there's like some white spots in the stubble right
Yeah.
here. That surprisingly is not old age. So the next morning, my fire engine red beard turned as white as Santa Claus's, and I freaked out. I had no clue what was going on. I had a couple. I'm pretty covered with tattoos,
Yeah.
and I have a few of them on my arms that actually the color started to get eaten out of them. So I called my doctor, panicking, thinking there's something bad going on. And you think I had just won the Super Bowl with their reaction, because the doctor who I was seeing at the time said, "That means you're one of the top 0.0001% to respond to this medication. Sorry about your tattoos, but this is a damn good thing." So
So
basically,
what was happening? Like, did they give you a
so
detail?
it basically caused me to get vitiligo, and I have spots on my body that have lost pigmentation.
Yeah.
And when I shaved my face fully of stubble, you could still see some big white blotches all over my face. But essentially, it was going the distance, the drugs, and it was attacking anything that didn't belong, and it was attacking some stuff that did belong, but it was doing the job. It was cleaning stuff up, and we actually within a month started to finally see regression, which everyone was like startled. So I figured, you know what? We got some time left. So all those buddies that waited hand and foot on me, I started to take them on something that I very morbidly, because I have a very sick sense of humor, I deemed it the Sean Wachter death tour. And I took my friends on all these wild trips, and we traveled the country. And yeah, there was a lot of times when they wanted to go out at night and party, and I just had to say, "Hey guys, you guys have fun. I'll see you in the morning," because I was tired. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say all of a sudden I became Superman,
Yeah.
but I knew that I needed to get back out there, and like Stewart said, just live. So if I died, at
Yeah.
least they could say, "Hey, you know what? He went out
Living.
living.
Yeah.
He went out being Sean." And part of that was my dad went ahead and said to me, "What are you going to do next?" And after I got back from like the second or third trip, and I said, "You know what I'm going to do next? I'm not going to rot away on your couch. I'm going back to doing something I loved." And it wasn't wrestling at that time, not yet, but it was coaching high school football. And a buddy of mine was coaching at a local high school here on Long Island down in the States. And I said, "Hey, look, I don't care if I get paid or not." And he was actually able to get me paid, but I donated the money right back to the program because I didn't know if I was going to be able to finish the season, or I would have been able to give 110%. But it put back in schedule and normalcy to
Yeah.
my life. And as much as I got out of going there, keeping my mind sharp, breaking down film, coaching, teaching technique, I got more out of dealing with the kids than anything. And I always tell this story. I had happened to have to get chemotherapy on a Friday morning. That was normally my chemo morning, was Fridays. And we had a holiday down here in the States. And the kids didn't have school that day, but they had a game because they couldn't play the game on a Monday because there was a religious holiday. So it was a very long weekend. But essentially, the game was being played about a mile down the road from Memorial Sloan Kettering. And I got my infusion and went right from the chemotherapy chair to coach football. It was raining. We were playing a school that we really had no business playing. They were ready to smack us around. And I'm not going to say this is one of those Rudy or Cinderella stories.
I was about to say that.
No, nothing about this was pretty. I had watched countless hours of film. I had played the school myself when I was in high school, and it was just no good was going to come of this. And it was pouring rain. I pulled up. I immediately had to run to the toilet. I went to the porta potty, and it was not pretty. And I got out of the porta potty, and my buddy had already started warming up all my offense and defensive linemen for me. And I came trotting over, and the kids had all those fancy Nike and Under Armour gloves that their parents probably overpaid for, and they weren't even kids that saw the field. But they're doing like a traditional American football 3-point stance, but instead of putting their hand on the ground, they're kind of hovering their hands. So I looked at them. I said, "The hell are you guys doing?" "Oh, coach, it's raining. We don't want to get our gloves wet because we'll get cold." And at that point, I just lost it. I lost it. And I said, "Are you kidding me? I just passed blood in the porta potty," which I said in a much more decorative fashion to them. And I said, "And you're going to complain about being cold and wet when I was just around people that are dying and would give anything to be out here, just to even watch you play?" I said, "What is your effing excuse? What is your excuse going to be next? Or are you going to rise to the occasion?" So we wound up losing that game by a lot. I think we actually got mercy ruled. And when I returned to practice on Tuesday after the long weekend, I lost it again because I came out onto the practice field and there was 50 young men wearing t-shirts that said on the front beach football, and on the back there was a black ribbon that said Coach Wack strong, because my last name is Wachter and it just Wack is easier. So Coach Wack strong, and in big blue letters it just said, "What's your excuse?" And there was not a big enough pair of sunglasses to hide me crying. And
It's
those
awesome.
those young men came over and gave me such a hug, and they had no idea that twice that year I had to have someone pick me up around the corner from the school and take me to the hospital during practice because I lost my eyesight from pushing myself too hard. So to have those kids rally around me was something special. That season wrapped up, and my folks said, "You know what? You need to put yourself back out there." And I'm sorry to keep going, but
No.
this is so important to me because this is where I feel, and you could appreciate what's coming next. This is where I feel that I push myself to be here, and I feel that this is what made me cement being here. My parents wanted me to put myself back out there from a dating perspective, and part of getting sick was, I had to stop working out. I had to start taking a whole bunch of corticosteroids like Decadron and prednisone. And I was a 300-pound offensive lineman in college, but I went back up to 300 pounds in not a pretty way. I
Yeah.
had the I had the moon face. There was no real muscle tone to me. It was just I looked like Grimace from McDonald's, if anyone remembers Grimace. So going and putting myself back out there, first off, you're not looking too good. You have terminal cancer. Like, wow, what a catch. So I had a few failed dates, and I went on a dating app, and I saw somebody that I thought I knew from high school, really pretty young lady. I swiped right, and she swiped left. So no match. But I said, "You know what? I'm dying. What the hell do I have to lose?" So she was following me on Facebook, and I messaged her, and we wound up speaking for 6 hours. And then the next day, we actually wound up having lunch, and we had lunch for 7 hours. And we have been attached at the hip ever since. We are now married. We have a beautiful 4-month-old daughter. I helped her raise my stepdaughter, her daughter, from age 14 months all the way up until soon to be 8. So, the two of them, my wife and my stepdaughter, really came along at a time where, you know, I saw them and I saw the love that they had to offer me. And I was the guy who never wanted to get married. I never wanted a house and I never wanted kids. Well, now I have all three and I doubled down on one of the three, but it just, there was something to them that I was just like, oh God. And I love that little girl so much. And I'll tell people to this day, my best friend's an 8-year old and they brought out the best in me. And I didn't realize this. So she just wasn't a girl I knew from high school. Turns out when I spoke with my mother, she was actually born 13 days before me, 5 houses down on the same block. So when we were babies, we used to get pushed in the stroller with one another. My wife will hear this and vomit all over the place, but she technically was the first girl I ever dated and
Went
will
on a
be,
d- went on a date with a stroller on the block.
yep, and will be the last girl ever date. So, it was really awesome. And she was following my journey. My mother had a lot of stress put on her, having to answer the phone all the time and tell people what was going on. So she asked me to kind of keep a running journal on Facebook just to keep people updated so she didn't have to do that. And I begrudgingly did it, but it was a source of, like I said, you don't realize how many people care about you until a situation like this happens. So the outpouring of support. And as I went back, I noticed, I was like, wait, she liked all these posts and all these journal things. And I was like, wait a moment. So truth be told, and I don't go into depth in it, but she left a difficult situation for her safety and my stepdaughter's safety. She needed to get out of the marriage she was in for both of their well-being. And I say to her all the time, how did you walk out of a house fire into a forest fire? And she said, I believed in you. And ooh, to this day, it still floors me. And from there, I wound up going ahead and I realized I was like, you know what? You got to do something with yourself because these girls, if you leave, you need to leave them with something. So I wound up going ahead and starting the largest independent coffee chain on Long Island. We had multiple stores. We had a whole wholesale division, and I ran that wholesale division and the partnership division all from the chemotherapy chair at Sloan Kettering. I tell people sometimes my best business deals were from the chemotherapy chair. And we had the accounts for the Nassau Coliseum where the New York Islanders used to play.
Yeah.
We had a minor league baseball stadium. We actually did a collaboration with the band Korn, which was pretty
Well,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. And then with something that I was really like super, super like over the moon about, box lacrosse, which I know is huge in
Canada,
Canada.
massive.
Yeah. I love the game. I love it
Yeah.
more than the outdoor game because it's just,
A lot of people aren't aware that lacrosse is actually our national sport.
yes. And it's such a great sport. I love
Yeah.
it. My stepdaughter plays it now and nothing brings me more joy than seeing
Yeah.
that coach
It's
her a
it's a
little
it's
bit.
it's a huge sport here. I mean, hockey is obviously the biggest thing here. Baseball is starting to slowly catch up, but hockey is massive here. But in all they're all playing lacrosse. They're
Yep.
all playing lacrosse.
So we used to have the New York Saints, but they folded
Yeah.
long, long, long ago. So we actually have now the New York Riptide, and their inaugural season, I was able to build a partnership with them, and
Oh,
also
awesome.
they brought me on as a consultant for the area,
Oh,
not
very
just
cool.
yeah. So that was neat to be that close to it. But then, unfortunately, COVID hit. I had to shut my businesses because it was just not good business sense. And I was not one for taking government money because you don't want to mess with the government.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my treatment got suspended. And that was kind of like, all right, now we're flying without a net. And I was still taking my oral pills, but I had to stop my infusions for 4 months. And when they finally had protocols put in place for New York State as far as how to operate with non-emergency life medical procedures, excuse me, they said let's get some scans on you first to see what we're dealing with before we start the infusions again. And wildly, things were still regressing. Their tumors were still shrinking. Everything was still going wonderfully. So we started up the infusions again, and it was almost like a supercharge. it just started to get back up again to the level where it was like the next scan, like, wait, this tumor's gone. That tumor's gone. This one hasn't changed sizes in 2 years. Like, this may be dead tissue. Like, we don't know what's going on with you. So fast forward to 2021, February. So this month, actually,
Yeah.
yep, 3 years ago, I actually got to go ahead and take my last infusion. And I did 120 infusions of immunotherapy. And they said, we're just going to keep you on the pills for a little bit and see how this kind of floats along. So they kept me on the pills. And then in June of 2021, they actually halved the pills. And they said, let's do another spinal tap and see how this lepto is going. So they did a spinal tap, and the spinal tap came back clear as crystal. No disease, no cancer. And they actually said, all right, we're going to have you come back in like another month, and we're going to repeat this because
Yeah.
this may be error. I went back in a month, another spinal tap, which is always a fun procedure to have.
I was
For
gonna
anyone,
say, yeah.
yeah, I've must have, between my neck issues, my back issues, and the cancer, I probably had about 11 or 12 of them. They're not, yeah, they're not fun. And
No.
especially at one point with the way my back was before some of the surgeries I've had, I had to literally have one of my football buddies come into the
Hold you down.
push one hip one way while the doctor pulled the other way. And I don't think I'm really supposed to be talking about that, but
Yeah.
they said, do you want to do this or wait 3 hours? And it was like, okay, we're going to push his hip. But yeah, so now we're kind of like, okay, what the hell is going on? So we go ahead and we fast forward to 2022. Around the March of 2022, they said, we're going to pull the final net out and you're going to stop taking the pills. So I said, okay, stop taking these pills. Let's see how it goes. And then in June of 2022, I wound up taking a DNA test. And that was, and another lumbar puncture, because of course they wanted another one. And the following month, my stepdaughter was 5, I believe, and I felt that she was age appropriate enough now to attend her first WWE live event. And to me, that was like, this was like the most special thing in the world to me, because my stepdaughter thankfully has my wife's intelligence, my wife's artistic abilities. But when it comes to her sports and things like that, she likes to copy her stepdad. And she's a big wrestling fan, big lacrosse fan. She likes to watch football. She wants to know why we're Jet fans if they lose all the time. And I just tell her to ask Opa Jack. But I figured, you know what, this is her first WWE event. Let me dig in my pockets, because my wife and I are very simple people. We don't live too crazy. You know, we like
Yeah.
to keep it simple. So I said, I'm going to make this like gaudy and nice for her. So I actually rented us a limousine, and I got some front row tickets, and they came with the whole go backstage and
Yeah.
take you
Yeah.
pick the ring. So there's some really neat stuff. So we're about maybe an hour out from the event, and my phone rings while we're in the limousine. And I'm sitting on one side of the car, my wife and my stepdaughter are on the other. And I look down at my phone, and it's that number, and it's the number you don't want to see. It's the Sloan Kettering number. And I didn't pick up at first. And then it rang again. And I said, oh, please, no, not now. You know,
Yeah.
I got her right there, happy as a clam, wearing her Andre the Giant t-shirt. You know, she's all set. And I picked up, and the nurse practitioner that was on the phone was crying. And she said, congratulations. You are the only person documented to have ever beat your disease. You are clear. You no longer have cancer. And my stepdaughter did not know. She thought her daddy was going to meetings every time my wife and I, drove me over to Sloan to get treated. And I got to share with her at that moment, your daddy was sick and now daddy's doing well. So we got to go to that event with a little extra pep in our step. And that was an awesome moment. But when I got home the next morning, I said, all right, it's time to tell folks that the war is over, so to speak. And those knucklehead friends of mine said, well, we're having a party. And I said, no, we're not doing a party. They wanted to go to Vegas. They wanted to do all sorts of nonsense. And I said, no, you guys don't get it. And they're like, we know you don't like a big deal being made about you. I said, it's not that. I said, why have a party when there's nothing to celebrate? And they said, what are you talking about? You're the only person to ever beat your cancer. And I said, there's still people dying from it. And I don't deserve this. I don't. I said, I know too many people that are much more deserving of a second chance than myself. So I don't want to celebrate. I have very bad survivor's guilt, and I always will. So I guess I kind of soothsay that by giving back. But my counter to my friends was exactly that, a means of giving back. I said, fine, we won't have a party. I said, we'll have a fundraiser. And they said, oh, that's great. And I said, I want to make sure it's done for, at that point, the newly formed Memorial Sloan Kettering kids. I said, I want them to get the money. So, everyone's trying to rush through the logistics, get it ready in 2 months because we were going to do it at the end of August. And someone said, oh, well, we need entertainment. And I said, well, I guess we could find some band or something. We had a venue. We had food and alcohol and all the good stuff. And someone said, oh, well, why don't you get some wrestling or something? Don't you know, like one of the local wrestling guys? I'm like, hey, you know what? Sure. They're like, well, nothing says Sean like wrestling. It's not like we got like a football game in the backyard here. So I said, all right. So I contacted one of the local wrestling promotions and they said, okay, fine. We'll come. We'll put on a show. And one of my friends had the brilliant idea of going on Facebook and putting up a poll and basically saying, if Sean wrestles, will you come and actually donate money? And it was 97% yes, 3% no. And I will always maintain that 3% was my wife, my aunts, and my. So needless to say, I maybe got back in the ring like twice preparing for this match. And looking back on it now, it was basically cosplaying a professional wrestling match. I got my hand held through it by a very good veteran of the Northeast independent scene. And, I won. So I thought, okay, there you go. There's the punctuation. We've raised great money. Time to ride off into the sunset. My wife, fast forward to December of that year, came to me with a pregnancy test and said, well, now you're a dad for the second time.
I love that.
I just said, what? Like, and I just was so shocked because this was not supposed to ever happen, and I just knew at that moment, hey, you got to get your ass back out there because I have to make sure that my wife is able to stay home because her mother stayed home. And I was raised, you do whatever the hell you can do to make your family comfortable. So I wanted her to be at home. So my girls had the exact same experience we both had. So I was fortunate enough to get a job working for a global marketing company called Global Interactive Group, who actually specializes in dealing with nonprofits, which is awesome because I get to deal with the same type of folks that I enjoy dealing with every day. And I thought that was it for me with wrestling. I started my MBA and I just kind of figured, all right, now that's done with, cancer is done with. Let's focus on taking care of the family. And my sweet little adorable stepdaughter went up to my wife and said, I didn't get to see daddy wrestle last year. Can I see daddy wrestle? Oh, goodness. I thought the glass broke and Steve Austin was coming out because my wife trudging across the house and definitely shared some pleasantries with me that I will not repeat. And I had to tell her, I didn't put her up to it. I did not put her up to it. So she said, fine, you get one more. One more. Well, as we know, it wasn't one more, but essentially I got the same group this year. The 2023 this was in. The friend that put that poll up on Facebook unfortunately passed away.
Oh.
So I approached this family and said, look, I don't want people thinking that I'm still sick. Can I put Michael's name on this so we could let people know Michael's story? Because Michael also had cancer, but passed away in the line of duty while being a fireman.
Oh, wow.
So I want people to remember the hero that Michael is, not me.
Yeah.
Michael's. So they said, sure. And we switched the thing to St. Jude's out of their request because Michael was very fond of St. Jude's. And we put on this event. It went wonderfully. It was heavily attended by local media, thus local politicians.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, they know can't go without that. They had to give me the big certificate, so it served a purpose for them being there.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, but we know what's really going on.
Yeah.
But with that, the local paper did a phenomenal story on me, which I was very taken back by. And I remember talking to one of my bosses, one of the owners of the company I work for, and he's a huge wrestling fan, and he was like, "This is really cool. We support this." And I was like, "Okay." So I put it up on my LinkedIn, thinking maybe it would help a couple organizations be like, "Hey, let's talk to this guy because clearly he cares about raising money for folks and helping others out." So put it up there, and the most unpredicted thing happened. ESPN actually messaged me,
Oh wow.
and yeah, and they said, "Are you aware of the V Foundation?" And I said, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm actually a V Foundation success story. My treatment plan was derived with money that you guys raised." So they said, "We'll be in touch." And not even 6 hours later, a V Foundation person reached out to me and they said, "You're our next story. You're our next person. Welcome to the family." And I spoke to my company and said, "Hey, are you guys cool with this?" And they said, "Go ahead. Awesome." They actually hired a PR firm for me. So talk about a company that
It
supports.
supports. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they still do support this. They tell me this is an extension of my job now, which is amazing, which my wife is cringing at, but hey, it is what it is. But I remember the most important question they asked me, and they said, "Do you still wrestle full time?" Well, as somebody who realizes an opportunity, I said, "Of course I do." So I went back to wrestling full time with the New York Wrestling Connection, which is my local promotion. And I actually wound up getting 3 months being back with them. I got to main event the largest independent wrestling event on Long Island history, where there was over 2,000 people in attendance. I was on Sirius XM radio the day before on Busted Open with Tommy Dreamer, who happened to be wrestling on the card as
Yeah.
well. And they gave me a lovely 20-minute segment, and enough people caught wind of that and the event itself that all these other cancer organizations came out and said, "We'd like to tell your story as well." And as time went on and I began to develop my Instagram account
Yeah.
as directed to by my PR firm, because I have a personal one that's, all my family stuff, but they're like, "You need to put this out there and let people see this message." And it's grown like gangbusters. It really has. The biggest takeaway for me is, the daily interaction I get to have with so many people that
Yeah. Yeah.
either in the fight or out of the fight. That to me is worth its weight in gold, just getting to interact with those people. But, as far as wrestling is concerned, yes, now I'm back in full time and I can't speak about a lot of the things that I'm doing because there's some very big people involved. But I was fortunate enough to go in front of a scout the other day for a large, if not largest, wrestling promotion in the world. So fingers crossed on that one. But
This is
yeah,
awesome. Awesome.
yeah. So that's basically where we're at now. It's just the amount of stuff that's coming in and getting put out. I am beyond humbled by it, and I will continue to do this as long as people get something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My tagline is this: when you're the cancer fighter and there's not a cure yet, you fight forever.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I love it. This has been awesome, John. And it's, man, your impact, and that's one thing I'm trying to do, where I've been an entrepreneur for 27 years. I run a whole bunch of corps. We do really, really well, but this cancer journey has given me another angle where, like I said, we do the Prevail Over Cancer podcast now with the scientist, Keith Bishop, and that's just bringing awareness and as much knowledge to people trying to fight this battle and conquer it and prevail over it, right? So I get messages on a weekly basis, 2, 3 people messaging me and like asking me questions, and I'll either refer them to people that have the knowledge, or I'll try to help them if I could. But it's that impact that we're having on people is so special. And I think as long as we keep doing that, even if you are able to help one person,
It's all
you've done
worth
him
it.
100%. 100%.
I always say, I said, you know what? If what I'm doing right now, if it could lead to one person living
Yeah,
fuller or fighting harder,
that's
then
all.
all my pain and suffering was worth it. And I would go down the same road 1,000 times again. I would not, if I can go back and change anything in my life, I would not change a damn thing.
Yeah, I say that all the time. I say
Because
that all the time.
I have done better quality living after I was diagnosed with cancer than the previous 31 years.
Yeah, because you appreciate life. You've lived life.
Oh, cancer is beautiful, and cancer is beautiful to me just because I came out clean on the other side. It was like, that movie Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah,
Well, you know what? Prior to having cancer, I was in a prison, and that prison was just
yeah,
mediocrity, going through the motions, not living a fulfilling, all out life,
yeah.
borrow a Slipknot lyric. And then I went through the cancer, which was crawling through that sewage pipe. And yeah, I came out clean the other side. And to not live a life of service on my second go around, which I don't deserve, would be spitting in the face of everyone that believed in me.
I appreciate that. This has been awesome, brother. I appreciate this. I'm sure our relationship is going to continue from here on, and I'm sure there's more things we could probably do together. So, thank you for coming on. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and this is awesome, buddy. Thank you, brother.
No problem. And I just to wrap it up for you,
Yeah,
folks can find me at the Cancer Fighter Sean Wachter on Instagram. There's my link tree, which was set up to all the cool stuff that's come out and the cool stuff that will be coming out. And I do work with the V Foundation and Melanoma Research Alliance and F Cancer, amongst many.
yeah,
But I'm really excited, for the Canadian audience, Melanoma Canada, I will be working with. They're going to be putting out a feature on me shortly. And for Rare Patient Disease Day on February 29th, the Save Your Skin Foundation, which is based out of Canada, is going to be doing a piece on me as well. So I'm very endeared to my brothers and sisters up north.
love it. I love it. We're gonna put it. I always do that. I put all in the show notes, all your links and all that stuff like that. So that'll be amazing as well. Thank you so
Well,
much for this, brother.
thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And everyone out there that's in this, hey, keep
Got
fighting.
this. 100%. 100%.